Welcome back to Tea Time with the Pro Noun. Joe Convertino co-hosting. Good morning, Joe.
Good morning, Perry.
Good morning, Connor. Okay, folks, we said that Mr. Fust was going to be on with us, Hank Fust, and he is. Mr. Hank Fust, good morning, sir.
Morning, Perry. Morning, Joe.
Morning.
Yeah, we loved your conversation last week about the PGA Tour and whether it's a merger, joint venture, who knows what it's going to be. But you've done some research, and you probably know as much as anybody does. And we'd like to have you sort of like review what you were talking about last week and then get into the what you found out this week, Hank.
All right. Well, I'll try and be quick with it. Don't want to bore anybody with the numbers, but as I said last week, we're talking about some pretty large companies here. The tour itself, again, as I said last week, has about $4.5 billion. That's with a B in assets, and the revenue is $1.5 billion. The Saudi private investment fund has about $600 billion in assets. And again, as I said last week, if you were to take a look at Ford Motor Company and General Motors, add them together, you don't get $600 billion in assets. It's bigger than Google, Facebook, pick a company. But
wow,
and it's a way of the Saudis diversify instead of just being invested in oil. They're not the biggest. I guess the biggest I saw was Norway, which surprised me, with $1.4 trillion in investments.
Wow.
So anyway, you've got two really large entities. The tour, highest paid compensation goes to Monahan. One situation I looked at, he was making in cash $8 million a year, plus his fringes of about $5 million. But that's hard to read. All of this is available on from the tour standpoint online. You can just look up their tax return, and it lists all their compensation. Now, when it goes over to the let's call it a joint venture, because I think Monahan has backed off on calling it a merger. That came out of a news release that came out. Apparently, it's not a merger. The information that is online, anyway, is that it will be a private corporation. I saw that Reuters had put out that it was estimated that it would be a U.S. corporation, but it doesn't have to be. There is no tax treaty between the Saudis and the United States, in which case that could foster a foreign company where, they could create a company in Switzerland, which certainly does have a tax treaty with the United States. And many U.S. companies use that when they deal with it. For example, if you have a company in Vietnam, you can't, there's no tax treaty between Vietnam and the United States, so you create a Swiss company and you run it through Switzerland, and that's how it works. But the estimate is that it will be a private entity. It will be controlled by the tour. Monahan will be the CEO. The chairman of the board will be the current chair of the board of the PIF. So it will be a Saudi. The equity that will be put into it, at least according to Reuters, will determine the ownership. So if the PGA Tour puts, let's say, $2.5 billion in, and the Saudis would then match with $2 billion, so that the control would stay with the PGA Tour. But you're talking, you start talking about making $1 billion investments. It's pretty interesting. Although for the Saudis, they have over a $5 billion investment in Uber, for example, and they are very heavy into the soccer leagues in the European market. Probably the thing that I thought that was most interesting as I did my reading on it was, and I think it was quoted from Peter Malnati, who is one of the PGA Tour player reps on the board. He's one of 5 player reps on the 10-member board. And he was quoted as saying that they expect that the players who stayed loyal to the tour will be compensated. I don't know. They don't know what and how. They call it a PIP, which is a player incentive program. And he said they might go so far as that the fellows who stayed with the tour may well have equity in the new company as a way of compensating them. So that one's really up in the air, but I thought that was interesting, that they're going to try and do some form of equalization because, of course, a lot of the guys who jumped over to the LIV got an awful lot of money. And that's about it. That's kind of where, in 30 seconds or from 30,000 feet, is what you see on the Internet as being out there. It's still pretty unexplained by both sides. What information is out there is just stuff that's been leaked, or whatever Reuters source is. That was the best article I saw. And if either you or Joe have some questions, Perry, fire away.
Yeah, go ahead, Joe.
Well, I was going to say, it seemed to not quiet down, but, the players and what they're thinking. I mean, you talked a little bit about Hank, the soccer over there. They're contracted, so, they make money to play for a team. Maybe from a golfing standpoint, the players are going to get, it sounds like, possibly compensated plus winning tour events.
It's quite possible. There's nothing, Joe, that seems to be in the public eye yet that will say that how exactly that's going to happen. I don't know, that maybe they don't have that figured out yet, but at least it's on the table. Which, for those people who stayed with the tour, it certainly makes sense that their loyalty should be compensated, and they're going to be running the tour, and the tour is run by a board, and half the board is made up of players. So, if I'm on the board and I control the situation, I'm certainly going to take care of myself.
Yeah, of course. And by the way, you probably know that United States Senator Richard Blumenthal, a Democrat, and Senator Ron Johnson, Republican, they've sent a formal invitation to PGA Tour Commissioner Jay Monahan about having they want them to testify at a hearing in the United States Senate on July 11th, 2023, and they want Jay Monahan, Yasser Al-Rumayyan, who is the investment fund governor, so to speak, of the Saudi Arabian money there, and Greg Norman. I can just imagine that circus. In fact, I'm writing an article about it. I'm going to submit it for next week to be published. But what do you think is going to come out of that, Hank?
Well, Perry, when Congress gets involved, it always gets a little bit interesting. But they've got the Department of Justice taking a look at it because they're looking at antitrust. And a monopolistic move in that professional golf would be totally controlled by the tour or by this new entity. In the new entity, you got to remember that in the U.S., the PGA Tour is a not-for-profit corporation, which is a little unusual. At least I thought it was until I found out the NHL and the NFL are still not-for-profit. But the last time that I think that happened was when the ABA and the NBA merged. I think it was the NBA and the ABA. And they determined that it was going to be monopolistic, that they were controlling that. And so Congress wrote a special law allowing them to be monopolistic. I thought that was pretty interesting. So, yeah, they're going to investigate it. The last time they investigated something like this, and this is the second time that they've looked at the tour. This is not the first time. They looked at it once before. And so I think it was about 20 years ago that they took a look at it and thought they were monopolistic for some reason. So this is standard congressional investigations into things that hit the front page. You hope not, but you wonder if it isn't just a political move. But it doesn't hurt for our Congress to take a look at what's going on, and particularly since the investment is with a foreign entity. I look at it and I say, well, again, you've got the European Tour that's coming under this as well. Remember, it's a three-legged stool. It's not just the PGA Tour and the LIV Tour. It's the entire European Tour. It's also being put into this new corporation.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, there you have it. Hank Fust, founder, Fust, Charles, and Chambers, LLP. Certified public accountants here in Syracuse, New York, knows as much about the situation as anybody else, and they've explained it as well as anybody else on TV, hasn't he, Joe?
Yes, he's knowledgeable. He's knowledgeable.
Well,
remember what I'm talking about. It's just a compilation of things that I've looked up on the internet because you asked me to take a look at it. It's pretty complex when you start putting a U.S. not-for-profit that's got $4.5 billion in assets, together with a Saudi government that, we aren't exactly ecstatic about dealing with.
Correct.
And then you throw in the mix, 3 entities, which is the tour, the LIV Tour, and the European Tour. It's a pretty complex scenario. And how it comes out, it does sound like the players will be equitably treated. That's good news, I guess. And the tour will continue to operate, and hopefully it'll, return in another year or so to, again, Perry, as you and I talked, hey, we're all into the game of golf. From my standpoint, all I want to see is play the course as you find it, play the ball down as you find it, and count all those strokes.
Well, let me say this. Let me say this before we say thank you. I believe you have put the pieces to the puzzle on the table as well as anybody I have heard since this whole debacle started, Hank, and I want to thank you for that. And so,
you're welcome.
Yep. And by the way, Hank is also president of the New York State Golf Association with 40,000 members. Thank you for your contribution to that association, Hank. And have a great weekend, Hank. We'll see you soon.
Happy 4th, Hank.
Okay.
Yeah.
Thanks, guys.
Okay.
Take care.
Yep. Wow. Okay, we got to get going. We're running behind. This is News